Okay, we're here with Jared Tendler, mental game coach to the stars, sports psychology expert to professional poker players, Einstein picture in the background. How's it going?
Yeah, he's there to make me look smarter.
He's there to make, yeah. It's what was the thing he said? If you can't explain it to your grandmother, you don't know it or something.
Yeah, you're just an idiot.
Yeah. How's it going? We haven't seen you on Poker Strategy other than one article at New Year, but I think last time you did anything significant for us, that was before you'd been the issue of November Niners. What's been going on?
Right. Yeah. You're making me feel guilty now. I've been certainly busy. Got a little writing project, which I can't really talk about publicly, but it'll be fun to come out soon. And then other than that, we moved into a house about a year and a half ago, and there's just always stuff to be doing with it. So I've been busy with work, family stuff. I've got a 2.5-year-old. Always fun to have her running around and growing like a weed, and kind of just gets more fun and more fun every day. Work-wise, I've been working with professional video game players and day traders more of late. So
I have a question about that in an upcoming segment, but keep talking. Yep.
Okay. Well, I won't go too deep into it then. But so kind of firmly with poker still. I've got a professional golfer that I'm working with now. I can't say any more than that because it obviously would give it away who it is. Work is great. I'm still loving what I do. Challenged in lots of unique ways. Personally, things are well. So yeah, all around rocking and rolling.
See, I wanted to make a Tiger Woods joke there, but then I thought there's a slim chance it could be Tiger Woods because even though Jared and I have been friends for close to a decade, he doesn't tell me who his clients are. Just one day wake up and sort of say, "Oh, guess what? My client won XYZ," and the only reason he's allowed to say it is because they publicly stated it. So, Hippocratic Oath is that, or are you just being a dick to me?
No, I think the Hippocratic Oath is more like don't do harm, which is probably the opposite here because I know that I'm purposely doing harm to you because I know how much it eats at you. So
fair enough.
There's that. No, it's more I just come from the therapy world and everything's private, so I just kind of keep it that way. Until somebody says otherwise. If they don't care, they don't care. But I kind of care probably more than I need to.
Yeah, it's a shame really for me. But so what we're going to do on this is we're going to look at a few of the stories at PokerStrategy.com from the last week, and my guest is going to chit chat about them. And obviously, with Jared as the first guest, there's probably going to be a psychology element to most of the questions.
Yeah, you better not be asking me about certain poker spots because I would
not know what to ask you these days. I am just almost as bad as you.
Okay.
But let's jump into some of the questions here. Can you see my screen there, Jared?
I can, yeah.
Okay, I didn't actually mean to start with that one, but I want to start with this one. What are the most influential poker books in history? Have you seen this one?
We're going with a softball. I have, yeah. It was very exciting to see.
Let's have a little look. We've got Harrington and Holden is number 1. Super System is number 2. I would have thought there would be another way around. Because Hansen's Every Hand Reveal is number 3. Mathematics of Poker number 4. What's that at number 5?
The Game of Poker. No, that's a good book. It's a good book.
Yeah, no, I just thought it'd be fun to plug that. If you don't know, I actually helped Jared write that particular book. It is a real compliment because A, it was compiled by professional poker players, that list, as far as I understand it. Not all your clients. And sort of B, the books that came before it, I think.
Either ways.
Yeah, no, the books that came before it are incredibly influential books. So I was pleasantly surprised by that also. But enough of the pointless spam. Let's get to something that you recently did for us, actually, Jared, at the start of the new year, and it is you gave your tips on how to crush poker resolutions. Now, I picked this one out because it's February. It's getting towards the end of February. You gave us this at the start of the year. And I guess my main point is, like, we're kind of at the point now where people give up on their resolutions, right? It's normally the time when people say, I didn't want to do that anyway. So, you know, what do we do at this stage to stay on track, or more likely, you know, get back on the track after a big derailment?
Yeah, I mean, there can be a whole host of things. You know, you may need to reevaluate your goals, because sometimes you're so inspired by like what you ideally would want to accomplish this year that you're not really realistic from the start, and so your goals are just too big. And sometimes people get really demotivated when they feel like the gap is just so large, and don't have a chance of accomplishing them. So, you know, what happens is a lot of times they just sort of quit entirely, or just like almost like over exaggerate how much they adjust downward what they try to accomplish. And I think that's a mistake. I mean, there's a reason why you wanted it at the beginning, and you know, 5-6 weeks, you know, ought not to be, you know, enough time to derail you entirely from something that was a year-long goal. I mean, if it was a goal that's, you know, through the end of February and you have a long way to go, then yeah, you probably need to quit and come up with something entirely new. But yeah, if it's like a working out goal, if it's, you know, something about studying, if it's a, you know, a volume goal, you know, just chop off, you know, 10-20% off the top of it, and see if that, you know, is still interesting to you. And if it is, then you know, go after it with veracity. But you can also kind of go after it, you know, with a little bit of kind of realism around, like, what have you done over the last, you know, 5 or 6 weeks that was positive? Like, what productive steps have you taken, you know, that you can kind of build on? Because sometimes people end up getting a little bit overly focused on, you know, the ways in which they have failed to live up to what they were intending, and you know, not seeing that they might actually have made some improvements, you know. So the failure kind of overweights, you know, that kind of progress. So you want to take a realistic look about, you know, the things you actually have improved on, what you have done, and try to build on that.
Let me ask you something which I'm not sure if I've ever particularly spoke to you about this. Let's see we have. But like, what do you think about making goals public and having some kind of stake to them? And I'll this. We have this ongoing promotion of PokerStrategy. It's been going for a couple of years now, called the Bankroll Challenge. You should be able to see it on the screen there. And basically what we do is we get our members to start a blog in our forum where everyone talks to each other, set a goal. This is a poker goal, a financial goal usually, but also they set personal goals, study goals. Lots of them have got a really good attitude to sort of work and stuff like that. And then we found that the combination of having that support network of other players reading your blogs and chatting to you, it's a forum-based blog, and also making the goal public, it kind of keeps you accountable to the goal and to your fellow poker peers. And, you know, just this week, and the reason why I brought this up is we've had 3 of our members all complete their goals in the same week. I know you've got nothing to compare it to, but that's quite spectacular for this particular challenge and the number of people we've got going. So anecdotally, we think it works. It could be a survivor bias, but what do you think about that? Because I kind of think if there's added pressure, like peer pressure, I think it can you know, spur you on when you'd otherwise slack off.
Yeah, it definitely can help. I think having the community aspect of it is really huge. You know, it's one thing if you're just posting something and, you know, there's not really a whole lot of people who are commenting on it or actually like giving you advice or giving you some perspective, you know, where it's basically just you sort of like telling people, so that there's sort of this like, you know, weird accountability where you feel like because you made it public, now you have to do it. You've got to show up and participate and do it. You know, that to me seems less positive, like more likely that you're hiding some motivational issue, more likely that there's something preventing you from wanting to be motivated for your goals on your own. But when you do it publicly in this forum, and actually you're getting a lot of advice, to me that actually seems a lot more productive, where it almost creates a team environment. And in poker, so it's such an insular game. But although there are a lot of teams that exist around the world, whether they're staking groups, whether they're just sort of like groups of friends that are poker players that talk strategy, like these things exist in lots of places. So I think that is a very positive thing to have. And if it just sort of happens that the people who are teamed up together live around the world and don't know each other other than a screen name, that's still the same thing. So that part of it I think is really, really healthy and positive.
Yeah, it's probably a sign of my weak mental game, but one thing I've been doing for the last year or so is if I don't go to the gym 3 times in a week, and as a second one, if I eat popcorn in the week, because I've got a real problem with popcorn, I have to give my wife £20 for each time I've done the thing I should have done or haven't done. And that has stopped me from eating popcorn, ensured that I go to the gym 3 times a week. Now, I might not do much at the gym when I get there, and sometimes I might just go in and order a coffee, but I go, and that's the important thing. And I guess you'd say that's a sign of me having a pretty weak mental game, but it works.
It is, yeah. Well, look, I mean, at the end of the day, like, we want results, so if your results are simply don't eat popcorn and go to the gym 3 times, then you actually are accomplishing your goal regardless of how you do it. I would say that, if there are other motivational issues that exist, then maybe what you're experiencing here is just a symptom of that.
You mentioned staking groups and sort of the team element of poker, not cheating team, but the colleague element of poker. It's nicely brings me on to the next thing that we've got, actually, because you are probably unaware, I think our members are aware, that we're venturing into the world of staking a little bit at PokerStrategy. We've partnered with a site called Spin Legends, which is a stable specifically for spin and go, variable price pool sit and goes. I think in theory we probably could do it for like Twister Poker and stuff. But I mean, Jared, how much do you know about these, Jared? Because I guess it's still a relatively new phenomenon, and you're not strictly speaking a.
What, spin and goes?
Yeah, but like, are many of your clients spin and go players?
Oh yeah, definitely.
And this is what I wanted to ask you about it, because most of the time, from the client's experience, it's a bit like grinding heads up sit and goes. You're playing for double your money most of the time. It's a relatively shallow stack game. But once in a while, you'll get the big multiplier, not the $1 million one, but you'll get some big multiplier. And all of a sudden, that must take you really out of your comfort zone. I mean, I can only liken it to like having a game of touch football or something, and then all of a sudden you're playing in the Super Bowl or something. So I don't know, what mental game tips would you give to someone who is like at some point just going to be thrust out of their normal games and playing something like huge, where all of a sudden the pressure is on and it's a battle of C games? I mean, what would your advice be? And has any of your clients had any problems around this sort of thing?
I mean, not in that scenario exactly. I think their issues are more general. But to give advice about that, I mean, the suggestions are massive, not massive, but there's like a whole number of things that we're discussing here, because I think what you got to look at is like in what way does that massive multiplier game take you out of your normal game? What changes in your decision making? Are you feeling more stress? I mean, sometimes, ideally, like that opportunity, ought to fuel, the zone. Ought to fuel, some of your best play. If it's not, then you want to figure out why. It's not necessarily going to cause anger, right? It's not going to cause a loss of motivation. It might cause a loss of confidence. It might cause some anxiety or pressure. So those are the things you're going to want to look out for, and you want to understand in particular, like, what is causing that confidence issue or that fear. Certainly there could be some focus issues, right? If you're having, in general, like not great focus, if you're the kind of player that is, doing other things at the same time that you're playing poker, and then all of a sudden now you have to focus. Like that kind of a mental shift can cause problems. So you want to get into a better habit of just being more focused in general, so that you can take advantage of not only that extra focus, which is going to make you more money in general, but then obviously then when the multiplier game comes up, then it's not as big of a mental shift to suddenly sort of have to like kind of turn it on.
Have you ever seen the videos of the guys that film the spinning game, and then they get a big multiplier?
Say it again.
I'm getting some like bad feedback on your thing. Oh, technical problems for a few seconds. Have you ever seen the videos of the guys who film themselves on Twitch and then they end up getting a big multiplier on a spin and go? There was a guy, one of our members, in fact, a Russian gent, who was playing his regular games, and all of a sudden he was playing for 250,000 euros. And then, as you can imagine, he went a bit crazy afterwards.
And he won it?
Yeah.
Yeah, I did see. I mean, I didn't see the whole game, but I saw obviously the victory of it. But yeah.
Speaking of new formats, alluding to the esports stuff that you were talking about previously, PokerStars are testing this new version of poker. It's not available yet, but it's really split the poker world. And it's basically a mix of Hearthstone, which I presume you're slightly familiar with, and poker itself. I'm just going to play the video and turn the sound off. It's basically you're playing poker, and all of a sudden you can get these powers or something where you can get a card that the video's paused now, but it's yeah, you can get a card that like gives you an extra card or takes a card away from someone else, and it looks like a hybrid of Hearthstone and poker. I bring that up to you because it's the world of esports and poker are becoming uniquely kind of married almost, and you just started working with some professional esports guys. What's that like?
It feels similar to when I first got into poker. I mean, it truly feels like an entirely different world. But at the same time, the people that are, gravitate towards poker, tend to gravitate towards gaming. Young, highly motivated to a degree, but to not kind of work a normal job. I was in well, I shouldn't say where I was because this isn't public yet either. But I was on site working with a gaming team, and like the feel of it had, like if I were to like go to like live at like a poker house, like that's kind of what it felt like. Guys spending hours in front of a TV, in front of a computer monitor, working really hard on their game and just kind of getting at it. But the sort of like mental and emotional demands are very, very similar to poker, and I think to a very large degree, the world of esports and gaming is very much kind of behind, and I'd say kind of like pretty close to where poker was, back, 7-8 years ago. Not necessarily like when I first got in. There are, other mental game coaches, working with teams around the world, so that I'm not the first one in there, or certainly not the first kind of bringing, a particular brand, or style to it, but there is a huge kind of untapped opportunity for a lot of gamers, similar to what was happening back, 7-8 years ago with poker, where, the majority of players just weren't even working on their mental game. I mean, the idea of like warming up before you play was not only foreign to poker players back when I started, but it was also something that I got a lot of pushback on. Like people were pissed off that I was like making them do something to make them a better player. So yeah, there's a similar feel in esports, and and frankly, I'm kind of having to like get used to like actually like the idea that I have to train people on like what is even possible. I kind of almost came in with like too high level or thinking that they were on a higher level in terms of their like mental game understanding, and that gap was almost hard for me. It was like a poker player kind of like out leveling their opponents. I feel like I wasn't quite as effective as I have been with poker players who were kind of already familiar with my material, and like really like starting from scratch with somebody is something that I haven't done for a while, and takes a bit of getting used to.
It must be weird having them on the couch, so to speak, and having them complain about not being able to slay an elf or I don't know what are the problems that esports guys have. It's so funny because I'm instantly making fun of them for playing video games for a living. How is that really much different than playing online poker for a living, which obviously I think is the cleverest thing in the world? I have a stupid bias there, but what typical things do they talk to you about that, like common problems, and what surprises you there?
No, there really haven't been any surprises. I mean, they're talking like these guys are professionals, right? They're making, they're under contract. They're playing in either leagues or they're playing in large events. They're playing around the world. They're playing in front of people. They have, some have massive followings on Twitch and on Twitter of people that know them. So they're talking about confidence issues and dealing with pressure, getting pissed off from losing. There is, to a degree, some variance involved in the game. I mean, there's like very little, but there's certain things that can happen where, it's probably like more like execution. Like you make a play that's like slightly bad, but it gets like kind of hammered, more than normal because somebody just kind of makes like the exact right play. It's like kind of like a cooler situation, where there's just sort of nothing you can do. But sometimes in these games, if you get behind early, it's not like poker. If you get behind early, it can really snowball against you because the game kind of more evolves, and the farther behind you are early, the harder it is for you to catch up. It's not like poker where, you might, be the short stack at a final table, but, still able to win because you can double up and double up. In these games, there isn't those sort of like large exponential jumps that can occur. So anyway, my point being that like dealing with losing, dealing with mistakes, the pressure of being in a team environment, not wanting to let people down, embarrassing yourself on stage, like it's the same shit, just a different context. And, and the challenge for me, like it was early on in poker, was just like learning the nuances of these games so that I can kind of know exactly how to be most effective and talk with them in a way that, really kind of gets to the root of what they're dealing with.
When did you last play a video game? Because I've not really played a video game since Tekken about 15 years ago, which I beat anybody at,
When I was in college, we used to love playing Mario Kart and Bond, 4-player game.
Yeah, GoldenEye, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Big screen TV. And yeah, I mean, I used to come home from class and you just like hear the heartbeat just like, on full blast of someone whoever had just died in Bond and just like left it. So it was pretty much on 24/7 for us.
I mean, it can be tilting. When I was younger, me and my friends, because we didn't have money, used to play this game called Tekken Flick Nose, where we'd play Tekken and then the winner got to flick the loser on the nose. And it's more painful than it sounds. And I've got a really good technique where I rest it on the bridge of the nose and do that. And
worked on it.
So we used to play double or nothing. And I got to the point where I'd accumulated 32-ish flicks on the nose to give to my friend, but we like negotiated terms, and I think it ended with me like flicking his nose 3 times, stamping on his foot twice, and throwing his shoe over a fence. And it's funny, like sort of 15 years on, he's coming around to put my carpet into floor of my kitchen in tomorrow. So the times have changed.
How that goes.
But yeah, I mean, in hindsight, I can understand how video games can be tilting. Probably should get onto the last story because I think it's a pretty important story.
Okay.
I'm sure
you mentioned.
It's what? Yes,
Yeah.
I'm sure you're aware of this story anyway. But probably the biggest anomaly in tournament poker that I know of. It's been going since 2002, the World Poker Tour. I counted, and it's well over 300 main events. Yet the first female player in an open event, there have been women win closed events and obviously women's events, was finally crowned this week. Emma Zajmovic. It was in Canada. She actually made the final table of the Montreal event a few months ago as well. So she's she's clearly sort of not a one-hit wonder, but bizarre anomaly when you think about how well women do in the game when statistically they're quite few in number. I mean, you've got a lot of female clients, right?
I have a handful, but not. I mean, probably proportional to the numbers in poker. If kind of like men to women who play. Yeah, I'm not really necessarily sure. Actually, you know what? I think my client base is actually lower than the percentage. I really only have a handful of female clients. I'm not necessarily sure why that is, but
well, the ones I know of are very accomplished female clients. I'm not gonna name any of them, but I know one of them's a very, very good cash game player, and I know one of them's won a major tournament, and I knew of a third one. But no, I mean, I guess the reason I brought this particular story up is my instinct is that mental game issues are essentially the same across the board for poker players. I would assume there isn't a gendered element to mental game issues, and you can probably answer this for me with your experience with athletes as well. I mean, is there any difference there? I mean, my assumption is that anyone that can compete at a high level is probably going to have the same range of issues as anyone else. I mean, what's your perspective on that?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think so I have a fairly biased sample, but the women that have come to me for coaching have tended not to have like the more severe tilt issues. And so I think, if you think about like the types of issues that women face mentally and the types of issues that men face, they are equal, but kind of like there are, like stereotypes that you can give to, people from different countries, that there are tendencies in terms of their style and in terms of their play. And yes, it's not like a prescription that says that every person from that country plays exactly the same way. Just like you would say that, there's not an exact way in which, men and women would be similar or different, because there are lots of individual differences, but there are tendencies, and so, yeah, men and women, I think, tend to have different issues that show up, but at the root, they may be exactly the same. They just sort of emerge in different ways, and, there may be differences in the ways in which they seek help and get help. Maybe, women are more likely to discuss their issues with themselves, amongst themselves, and not seek out somebody like me. Whereas, like a lot of my players, and this is, I think endemic of a lot of men, is, that they have never talked to anybody except for me about those issues. Like I'm the first person that they've ever talked about it. And so, you think about how isolating that is, and women tend not to be as isolated. So, they may be able to kind of work through stuff on their own. Whereas, a guy who's never talked to anybody, is not like, they don't have the resources to be able to figure that out. So again, I'm not, painting blanket statements here, but, those tendencies do exist. And again, obviously my sample is biased about, kind of who's showing up at my doorstep.
Yeah, I mean, I know you know this story, but I think it's worth repeating. Like, this is how bad men are at speaking about any problem. Is my dad, many years ago, went blind for 3 days. And the reason he went blind for 3 days, not just went blind, was because it took him 3 days to tell anybody, right? So he somehow was functioning almost completely unable to see, but didn't feel the need to tell anybody about it for 3 days, because clearly he didn't know how. And so, yeah, I mean, I think I guess in a way, the fact that anyone even makes the first step to contact you probably means that they've, done more than the average guy will do in this realm.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, there's a huge amount of either shame or embarrassment about, admitting that you have a weakness, which on the surface, and when you say it out loud, it's like ridiculous, because everyone has weaknesses. But when you like to actually cross the threshold of saying that I have one or that you have one, like it's difficult for a lot of people. And yeah, I think it's getting better. I hope, and I think sometimes people have this like viewpoint that if you start talking about your issues out loud, then you're just going to become like completely overwhelmed by them, and there's no way that anybody can even help, including somebody like me. So like, why even bother, mentioning it? I'll just kind of live my life, and it'll be what it'll be.
What are the national and regional stereotypes that you've noticed in players then? Because you kind of alluded to that. Are the Italians more hot-blooded? Is it something like that?
I'm not even saying like mental stuff. I'm even just saying like the different styles of play. Like, that people will say that Latin American players might be more aggressive, similar to like Italian or French players. The players from Germany are more, sort of logical and methodical, more GTO based and, kind of feel based. Like they're not going to be the intuitive type players, things of that sort. But again,
the British players have bad teeth.
No, they're just
That's
drunk.
not a thing, but
They're just drunk.
I guess it makes sense that men are more likely to have tilt issues based on what you just said, because I guess if we're going to go and eat down a biological route, men have loads more testosterone. Would you say those two are linked? Tilt is anger, testosterone, it's...
Possibly. Yeah, I truthfully don't know much about like kind of the biological roots or the hormonal sides to, anger issues. I tend to think they more, not necessarily are like, I tend to be more curious about like the psychological factors that influence hormones than the hormones that influencing biology or psychology. But they have to be there. I don't know a ton about it, but whether it's testosterone or just a general tendency towards being more aggressive for evolutionary reasons, it would make sense that men would tend to have more anger issues than women, or at least, again, like a lot of anger issues, like kind of when you dig beneath the surface, can appear very similar. It can be caused by the same sorts of problems that will produce anxiety also, and that's true in men, right? Some men will have more of a tendency towards fear than a tendency toward anger, and that's just like the actual roots of the issues are exactly the same. It just sort of shows up in different ways, and I would expect that the same can be true with women. That some women are going to be more likely to show their underlying, let's say, high expectations of themselves, or desires for perfection, or some illusions of learning, things of that sort, and have it come out in fear or in anger. So to me, I'm more curious about the roots of these issues anyway. Sort of it doesn't really matter what that person's gender is or the way in which it shows up, except to know how best to understand that person and how the correction is going to apply to them.
Would you say that if, as we were saying, men have a tendency to bottle these things up, would you say that bottling something up has a direct causal link to anger? Or would you say that the bottling up just has a causal link to however someone's mental game issue is going to manifest, whether it's anxiety or anger?
Yeah, it isn't. Like the bottling up has more of a connection to the size of an issue when it shows up, and the degree to which that person's reaction to that, like explosion, kind of jives with what they think of themselves, right? So like people who bottle things up are more likely to think like, oh, that's so unlike me, or like I can't even imagine how I would have done that, or and they're very quick to kind of like excuse it because it seems like a one-off thing. And that can happen too in terms of fear, right? Where you just like completely get paralyzed, in a like a final table, or in the multiplier game, and you just sort of think it's like a one-off, like it's just not kind of how you typically handle things. But the fact that you're bottling things up and not really dealing with them when they're small causes the explosion and causes that sort of significant overreaction.
I'm going to let you go, Jared. I've really enjoyed this. I think our viewers will have enjoyed it too. But where can we find you? Where can our members find you if they want to learn more about you, maybe get coaching from you, all that good stuff?
Yeah, Jared Tendler, PokerStrategy.com. There's a ton of free articles there. The podcast is there. Information on the books are there. And obviously there's there's a contact section. So if anyone wants to contact me, they can do that as well. And also I'm on Twitter at Jared Tendler.
At Jared Tendler. Well, thank you very much, Jared, and have a great day.
Yeah, thanks, Barry.